Next, we're going to get started on the youth course. We're going to start with the purposes of taxation, and then we're going to move to the 3 tax systems.
Let's just say it like it is. Taxes are a controversial topic, and they have been for a very long time. Before I can teach you all about tax systems and how to actually do your taxes each year, it will help if you understand why taxes exist and why there's such a hot button issue in the United States and around the world. So this entire video is dedicated to one of the world's longest running and most heated debates: why do we pay taxes? Taxation is when a government or other authority requires its citizens to contribute money to them, paying them in what are known as taxes. Taxation has existed in some form in nearly every civilization for thousands of years. Today, the United States has plenty of different kinds of taxes, each with its own rules and regulations about who pays what and when. Income tax, property tax, and sales tax are the most prevalent of these. Each of the different types of taxes are super important to know about, so we're going to cover all of them at some point during this course. Now, whenever we're talking about taxes, you can expect some pretty heated arguments. So, to help teach you about the nuances of these discussions, I brought a little help. I'd like to introduce you to my brother, Justin, and my other brother, Justin. Yeah, our parents weren't very creative with names. Kind of just stopped after the 1. So, my brother here, who's trying something new with his hair, is very pro-tax, and he sees them as the government's way to ease all of society's problems. And my brother here, who never takes his hat off, is very anti-tax and sees a government taking money from its citizens, no matter what that money's for, as an abuse of power that shouldn't be tolerated. Now, I'm going to take a step back and let these guys teach you about the 3 main purposes of taxes in today's society. And if things get a little too heated, I will step in and calm them down. Okay? Let's get into it.
No offense, but if you still think stocks, real estate, or crypto are the best passive...
One of the main purposes for taxes in today's society is to fund public projects and programs. Things like road maintenance, fire departments, public schools, the military, and other government-run public services are all funded through taxes. It's kind of like one big nationwide crowd fund, except with crowdfunding, you get to choose whether you want to contribute or not. You're not forced to. Would you be willing to pay for road construction? Referendums would allow local taxpayers to choose whether they wanted to contribute to that project or not. And then the funds would be collected through taxes, so that citizens don't have to donate their money directly. Do you want firefighters asking you cash or credit before they save your house? Sure, some public services are best funded through taxes, but not everything. Exactly. Because governments collect money through taxes and then use them to pay for public services, they make sure that all the features necessary for functioning societies are fully funded well ahead of time. A lot of that money isn't used for public services, though. It just goes right in the pockets of government employees. Well, yeah, government jobs are still jobs, and their employees still need to be paid. Since they're public servants, they are serving all of us, the public, so we should be the ones paying for them. No. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about the lawmakers who set their own salaries extremely high and then cash in on our hard-earned money. Yeah, that's a good point. It can seem a little fishy when lawmakers make so much money off of our tax dollars. But the question as to whether or not their jobs are worth that much money is a completely different discussion. One of the government's responsibilities is to keep its citizens happy. And people aren't too happy when they're so poor that they're struggling to survive. Taxes are used to redirect some money from the rich into services that help the poor so that they can lead better, happier lives. So the more successful people get taxed more. Well, that just doesn't seem fair. Nobody's going to have the incentive to work hard to become rich if they know that the taxes are going to make them poorer than before. That's not completely how it works, thanks to our progressive tax system and tax brackets. Whoever has the most money before taxes will still have the most money after taxes. We're going to learn more about tax systems and tax brackets in the next few lessons. Sorry for interrupting. The point is, if poor people don't want to be poor, they should focus on working hard to become successful. The government just doesn't have the right to play Robin Hood. It can be very difficult to...
I'm going to stop that for a second. The Robin Hood analogy is only partially correct. Remember, Robin Hood stole... So the Sheriff of Nottingham stole all the money from the people, and Robin Hood actually took the money from the people... from the Sheriff of Nottingham to give back to the people. What we're saying here is that the government is actually playing the role of Robin Hood in this case, which is entirely false, a false equivalency from the story. Let's go back to this, though.
Escape poverty if you don't have access to things like good education or basic necessities like food. If tax dollars are used to help with those things, then poor people can focus more on working hard and saving money so that they can escape poverty. Yeah, that's fair. I know as well as anyone it's hard to focus on work when your tummy keeps rumbling. Taxes can also discourage people from buying things that hurt themselves or others. And tax deductions can encourage people to spend money on things that help society. Tax deductions are kind of like the opposite of taxes. They're the government giving you money back. We'll learn more about tax deduction.
Just remember, they taxed you for that money to begin with. They're giving you back your own money.
In another future lesson. Okay, continue. That's just the government making decisions for people about what's good or bad. Not really. People can still spend money on cigarettes or college tuition. It's just that the government gives you an extra reason to choose one over the other. Why is that the government's concern? Because that's what our government is for. Acting in the best interest of its citizens. The same thing can be done to...
Actually, if you really take a look at what a good government is for, it's to settle... So what it was actually designed for, if you go back to the Founding Fathers, it was designed to settle disputes in between the states, should they have disputes with one another, and it was designed to be able to raise an army or a navy in times of combat in order to protect the nation as a whole. If you really go back to the way that it was in the Founding Fathers, the government, the federal government, was actually very, very weak, and the state governments were very, very strong, which is why a lot of our Founding Fathers are actually associated with the Federalist movement as opposed to the Anti-Federalist movement. They were actually looking to strengthen the government back in the early days because the government was so weak. We see what's happened to it at this point.
Improve the nation's economy. By raising taxes on imported goods, it makes people more likely to spend their money on stuff made here. Do you think that maintaining the economy isn't the government's job? Manipulating imports and exports doesn't necessarily improve the economy either. Besides, favoring industries over each other violates people's freedom of choice. Okay.
That's the difference between a free capitalistic market economy versus a planned economy. And again, that comes down to how much interference do you want in terms of the government picking winners and losers in the various companies that are out there.
Hey, we are gonna stop that right now. Ooh. Sorry about that. Sometimes my brothers can get a little worked up about taxes and get pretty angry, so I'm just gonna let them cool down for a minute. As you could probably see, people can have very different opinions on how taxation works and what it's actually used for. But don't just take it from my brothers and I. Ask some trusted adults what they think about taxes. Or better yet, have them sit down and watch this video with you so that they can expand on some of the points my brothers made. Whether you think taxes are good or bad, or maybe you're just indifferent to the whole thing. The reality is we do have to pay them. So it's important to understand how taxes work. In the next lesson, I'm going to teach you all about different tax systems, including the one we have here in the United States. See you then.
And we're going to head right into that right now.
This is how AI optimizes my schedule. This meeting got canceled. Hooray! We didn't really want to go anyway.
Hey there, it's Justin again. Now that you understand what taxes are and why they exist, we could focus more on how they're going to directly impact your life as a working adult. In this lesson, you'll learn about the different types of tax systems and which system we use in the United States. So by the end of this lesson, you will be able to calculate tax liability and tax burden, and use those measurements to compare the three types of tax systems. To reach that goal, first we'll have to learn the two ways that the cost of taxes can be measured. Then we can use those measures to compare the three types of tax systems: regressive taxes, proportional taxes, and progressive taxes. The cost of taxes on taxpayers can be measured two ways: as tax liability or tax burden. Tax liability is the actual amount of dollars owed. If you did your taxes at the end of the year and found that you made $47,950, the total amount you'd owe in income tax could be $4,000. That would be your tax liability. Tax burden measures the percentage of a person's income being taxed. $4,000 in taxes could be a tiny drop in the bucket for one person and a huge source of stress for somebody else. To measure tax burden, we divide the tax liability by income. So, for that person who owed $4,000 on an income of $47,950, their tax burden is 8.3% of their income. Okay, so now that we know how the real cost of taxes can be measured, let's use those measurements to compare tax systems. There are three categories of tax systems: regressive, proportional, and progressive. For each category, we'll learn how the liability and burden affect different people. Then go over some examples. In the notes, you'll find additional examples to practice comparing tax systems. A regressive tax system is one in which tax liability is the same for everyone, but that results in the tax burden being much higher for poor people and much lower for rich people.
Remember, the tax liability is the absolute number of dollars you are paying, whereas the tax burden is the percentage of your income that you are paying. So you can imagine that if everybody's paying the exact same amount, everybody's paying $500, folks who have a very high income, that $500 isn't going to make for much of a tax burden. But folks who don't make a whole lot of income, that $500 could be a huge portion of their income. And the tax burden, therefore, is much higher.
A tax liability of $1,000 is a much larger burden on somebody only making $20,000 a year than it would be for somebody making $2 million a year. This is a major criticism people have of regressive taxes. They disproportionately affect the poor and are barely even noticed by the rich. Examples of regressive taxes would be any tax that is the same for everybody regardless of income, like sales tax, which is based on what you buy, not on how much you make. Cashiers don't ask you for your income before telling you your total. Sales tax is different in every state, but in this example, it's 8.7%. So, anybody who buys $8.48 worth of stuff will be charged 8.7% of that, or 74 cents, which gets added to their total. Admission fees at museums are another example. They cost a flat dollar amount no matter who you are, which can keep lower income families from being able to have a fun educational experience. Another example that causes a lot of stress for some people are property taxes. With property taxes, people whose homes are worth the same amount will pay the same in taxes, regardless of how much they make. Whether the homeowners are a retired couple who have finished paying off all their loans, or a family that struggles to save money because they still have a mortgage and car loans to pay off, they will both be asked to pay the same in property taxes each year. Check your notes packet for an example you can work out to see how property taxes would affect these two families differently. It's worth noting that property taxes are set by the state governments and are not the same across the United States.
Are you a STEM professional and are looking to apply for U.S. permanent residency?
If these two families lived in the same state, they would have the same tax liability for the same house. But if they lived in two different states, their property taxes could be very different. If regressive tax systems seem a little unfair to you, some people suggest a proportional tax system instead. Proportional taxes are calculated as a percentage of everybody's income, resulting in an equal burden for everybody. Supporters of proportional taxes say that they give people more reason to work hard and earn more, since their tax burden won't change even if they get rich. An example of proportional taxes is the Social Security tax. Social Security tax is taken out of every paycheck at a rate of 6.2%. If you make $1,000 a month, you're taxed $62. If you make $10,000 a month, and $620 will be taxed. Always the same proportion, so it places an equal burden on everybody. At least in theory. That person making $1,000 would only be left with $938 to get through the month. For somebody making so little, every cent counts. That $62 may have been needed to pay bills or buy food. For the person making $10,000, they could lose $620 and still have over $9,000 left to pay their bills with, so they're a lot less likely to notice the missing money. For this reason, some people consider proportional taxes to be another form of regressive tax, because they believe that the impact is still higher on the poor than on the rich, even if the tax burden is identical. Another example of a proportional tax is Medicare tax. Through Medicare tax, every employee's income is taxed at a rate of 1.45%. And that money is used to help cover medical costs for the elderly and those with disabilities. The final tax type is a progressive tax. With progressive taxes, tax burden increases as your income does. It's basically the opposite of regressive taxes. Progressive taxes are often criticized for discouraging people from working harder, because more income means a higher tax burden. But others praise progressive tax systems for putting more of the burden on those who can afford it instead of those who can't, which was the major criticism of both regressive and proportional taxes. Let's look at some examples so you can decide for yourself. The largest example of a progressive tax in this country by far is income tax. The way our income tax system works, people with higher incomes pay a higher percentage of their income in taxes. Let's say somebody makes $21,000 a year. Their tax liability might come out to $805 for a burden of 3.8%. A person who makes $80,000 a year could be taxed for a total of $10,368 for a tax burden of 13%. Somebody making $155,000 a year might owe a little under $28,000, or about 18% of their income. You get the point. You earn more money, you're taxed at a higher percentage. The logic behind this is that those with more money are thought to be able to afford higher tax burdens without feeling the effects as much. There's actually a lot more to it, but you'll learn more about that in our video on tax brackets. Earned income isn't the only income taxed progressively. Some other examples are interest income, or income you receive as interest from loaning money to others, and rental income from renting out your property. When you file your income taxes, all of these will be rolled into one. Time for a quick review. Regressive taxes, such as the sales tax, place equal tax liability on everybody. Proportional taxes, like Social Security tax, place an equal tax burden on everybody. And progressive taxes, like income tax, ease both the liability and burden on lower earners by taxing higher earners at a higher percentage. Each system has its benefits and drawbacks, and which one is fairest depends on your definition of fairness. So, which of these do we have in the United States? Well, you may have already noticed this, but every example we mentioned in this lesson was an example from our own tax system. In the United States, a little bit of each tax style is mixed together, but the majority of tax revenue comes from income taxes. So our overall system is considered a progressive tax system. When you hear people complaining about how complicated taxes are, they're talking about income taxes, because a lot of math goes into calculating how much you owe based on your income. In the next lesson, though, I will show you the first step in doing your own taxes, calculating how much of your income is actually taxable. See you then!